Hello, welcome to OJ Studios. Please enjoy The Princess Dress, a Halloween story by Olivia Julius.
Chapter 1, The Princess Bed. It all began on a crisp October morning at our elementary school. The air was cool and dry, and every step I took was met with the satisfying crunch of fallen leaves beneath my feet. The smell of autumn filled the air, and the school playground, with its colorful equipment, glistened under the soft sunlight. I could feel the weight of my overstuffed backpack digging into my shoulders, but my mind was far from the upcoming lessons. There was only one thing dominating my thoughts: Halloween. For a kid, Halloween wasn't just a holiday, it was an event. A day to abandon the ordinary, to dress up as whoever or whatever you wanted, and, of course, to collect as much candy as humanly possible. This year felt different, though. The anticipation was still there, sure, but something was gnawing at me, an uneasy feeling that maybe things wouldn't go exactly as planned. I was lost in thought when I heard her voice. "Ethan!" Miranda's call rang out across the playground, breaking through the chatter of students gathering before the first bell. She was perched on a swing, her red hair catching the morning light, and a familiar mischievous grin on her face. Miranda and I had been best friends for years, but if there was one thing I'd learned in all that time, it was that grin usually spelled trouble. And trouble is exactly what I expected. With a sigh, I made my way over, kicking a stray rock across the blacktop. "What's up?" I asked, half expecting her to rope me into another one of her wild schemes. Miranda hopped off the swing and crossed her arms, her face full of excitement. "Halloween's almost here," she said with a gleam in her eye. "You ready?" I shrugged. "Of course! Got my costume all set. I had been planning this for weeks, nothing too fancy, just a classic pirate look. Pirates were always a hit, and I was sure it would do the trick." She raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. "A pirate? Really, Ethan? That's so basic." I stopped in my tracks, frowning. "What's wrong with pirates? Pirates are cool." "Sure, they're cool," she said, waving her hand dismissively, "but everyone does pirates. It's predictable. I was thinking you should try something a bit more bold." "Bold?" I echoed, a little wary. "What do you mean?" Miranda's grin widened, her eyes gleaming with mischief. "What if you went as a princess?" I blinked, sure I had misheard her. "Eh? Princess? You're kidding, right?" "Oh, I'm dead serious," she said, her smile growing. "Think about it, no one would expect it. You totally stand out, and you'd definitely win the costume contest." I stared at her, stunned. The idea was, well, insane. A princess, me? I shook my head, laughing. "You've lost it. No way am I dressing up as a princess." Miranda's face softened, and she took a step closer, dropping her usual teasing tone. "Come on, Ethan, think about it. You'd blow everyone's mind. No one would see it coming, and you'd make a huge statement. Plus, it'd be fun, don't you want to stand out this year?" "Fun?" I scoffed, but I hesitated, a small part of me intrigued by the idea. Standing out wasn't usually my thing, but there was something about the challenge that piqued my interest. "Plus," Miranda added with a sly smile, "my mom's making me go as Sleeping Beauty, so you wouldn't be the only one. We could do this together, royal siblings or something." I looked at her, surprised. Miranda wasn't exactly the type to embrace anything princess-like. She was more the type to challenge authority, prank teachers, and wear Halloween costumes that scared half the school. "You? A princess?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Since when are you okay with that?" She grimaced. "I lost a bet to my brother. He dared me to finish his impossible Rubik's Cube, and I failed. So now, I'm stuck being Sleeping Beauty. But if you join me, it won't be as embarrassing. We can make it epic." I couldn't help but laugh. "So, you want me to dress up as a princess just so you don't have to suffer alone?" "Exactly!" she exclaimed, snapping her fingers. "But more than that, it'll be legendary. People will be talking about it for years. I bet you'd even win the costume contest." I crossed my arms, considering her words. Dressing up as a princess would definitely be unexpected, and I had to admit, the thought of shocking everyone was kind of appealing. But still, I wasn't sure if I was ready for the inevitable jokes. And what happens when the whole school laughs at me? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Miranda shook her head, her expression earnest. Trust me, they won't. Once you commit, you'll totally own it. Plus, I'll do your science homework for a week. I laughed. Miranda knew exactly how to sweeten the deal. She was a genius when it came to science, and I was. Well, not. Her offer made the whole idea a lot more tempting. Okay, let me get this straight, I said slowly. If I wear a princess costume, I get my science homework done for a week, probably get laughed at, but might win the costume contest and score a ton of candy? Miranda nodded, her grin returning. Exactly. I stared at her, then glanced around the playground, making sure no one was eavesdropping. The more I thought about it, the more the idea of shocking everyone with something so out of character seemed fun. Ridiculous, sure, but kind of fun. Alright, I said with a sigh, I'll do it. But if this backfires, you're doing my math and history homework for a month. Miranda let out a triumphant laugh and gave me a playful shove. Deal! You won't regret this, Ethan! It's going to be epic! The bell rang, signaling the start of the school day, and as we headed inside, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just made the craziest decision of my life. But at the same time, I couldn't help but feel a rush of excitement. This Halloween was definitely going to be one to remember. Chapter 2, The Request. That afternoon, as I walked home from school, the swirl of emotions inside me felt impossible to untangle. Excitement, anxiety, confusion, it was all mixed up in a confusing knot that churned in my stomach. A princess costume? What had I agreed to? Dressing up as a pirate was simple, no one would bat an eye at that. But now, I was about to step into completely unknown territory. I couldn't stop replaying the conversation with Miranda in my head, second-guessing myself at every turn. Was I really going to pull this off? Miranda had been clear about what princess I should go as. I had never really paid attention to princesses, after all, I was a boy. But apparently, Miranda had been thinking about this a lot more than I had. You should go as Cinderella, she had said earlier, eyes sparkling with that mischievous look that I was starting to associate with trouble. Classic, iconic, and definitely not something anyone would expect from you. Cinderella? Of all the princesses, Miranda picked the one with the ball gown, glass slippers, and magical fairy godmother. I hadn't even realized there were so many different princesses until today. But of course, Miranda had it all planned out, down to the last detail. By the time I reached home, my nerves were kicking in full force. The house was quiet, as it usually was in the afternoon. My mom was in the kitchen, busy chopping vegetables for dinner. The rhythmic sound of the knife hitting the cutting board was oddly soothing. She looked up when she heard the door, greeting me with her usual warm smile. Hey, sweetheart, how was school? Fine, I muttered, still playing out the scene in my head, me, in a Cinderella dress, parading around school. I hung up my backpack, trying to figure out how I was supposed to explain this to my mom. Asking for a pirate costume would have been a piece of cake. But now I had to convince her to help me find a dress. I hovered awkwardly in the kitchen doorway, feeling like a fish out of water. My mom glanced at me over her shoulder, picking up on my hesitation immediately. Ethan, are you okay? You seem distracted. Yeah, I mumbled, fidgeting with the strap of my backpack. There's something I need your help with. The words came out weakly, and even I wasn't convinced by my tone. My mom wiped her hands on a towel and turned to face me fully, her expression gentle and patient. Of course, sweetheart! What's on your mind? I took a deep breath, feeling my heart pound a little harder. So, you know how Halloween is coming up, right? Her smile widened. Of course! You've been talking about it for weeks. Still going as a pirate? I winced. Here it was, the moment of truth. Well, that's the thing. I was going to, but now. I think I might be going as Cinderella instead." There was a brief pause. I braced myself for the laughter, the questions, or at the very least, the surprise. My mom's eyebrows did lift slightly, but instead of teasing me, she simply nodded. "Cinderella, huh? That's quite a change. What made you decide on that?" I launched into the whole story, explaining the costume contest, Miranda's wild plan, and the bet she had made with her brother. I told her about how Miranda was dressing up as Sleeping Beauty and how she had convinced me that going as a princess would be a bold move. The only thing I left out was the promise of her doing my science homework for a week. My mom listened carefully, her expression soft and attentive, nodding at all the right moments. By the time I finished, her lips were curled into an amused smile, and her eyes sparkled with understanding. "Well, that does sound like something Miranda would come up with," she said. "So, you're really going through with this?" I shifted uncomfortably, shrugging. "I guess so. I mean, it's not like I've ever done something like this before, but it's kind of an interesting challenge." I wasn't sure if that was the truth or if I was just trying to convince myself. Her smile deepened, and she walked over to me, placing a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "It takes a lot of guts to try something different. If you're okay with it, I think it sounds like a lot of fun." I felt a wave of relief wash over me. I had been expecting some kind of resistance or, at the very least, confusion. But instead, my mom was totally on board. "So, will you help me, then?" I asked, feeling a little more confident now. "Of course! But we're going to need to make it special, aren't we? No cutting corners for Cinderella," she said with a playful wink. "How about we start by finding the perfect dress?" The thought of actually wearing a dress still felt surreal, but my mom's enthusiasm made it feel a little less weird. She wasn't judging me, and that made all the difference. "Yeah," I agreed, feeling a nervous laugh bubble up. "I guess that's the next step." She wiped her hands on her apron and started rummaging through a drawer, probably looking for her car keys. "We'll head to the store tomorrow afternoon after school. That gives you a whole day to think about whether or not you really want to do this." "Okay, Mom," I replied, a mix of emotions flooding my chest. I was kind of happy, kind of nervous. As I headed to my room, I realized how crazy this whole thing sounded. Me, dressed as Cinderella? It felt like a ridiculous joke. But at the same time, there was a small part of me that couldn't help but wonder what it would be like. Maybe Miranda was right, maybe this would be legendary. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I couldn't stop my mind from racing. What would people say? What would they think? Dressing up as a princess was the last thing anyone would expect from me. But maybe that was the whole point. Chapter 3, The Decision. The next day at school, I couldn't focus on anything. My mind kept wandering back to the conversation with my mom. Was I really going to go through with this? Dressed up as Cinderella, of all things? I knew Miranda would be all in on the idea, she always was when it came to wild schemes, but I still wasn't sure if I had the courage to actually do it. By lunchtime, I found myself sitting with Miranda, nervously picking up my sandwich. I glanced around, half expecting someone to start talking about how ridiculous this all was, but no one knew, yet. I figured I still had time to back out. "So, have you told your mom yet?" Miranda asked, smirking as she took a bite of her apple. "Yeah," I muttered, not looking into her eyes. "She's surprisingly cool with it." "Of course she is!" Miranda said, clapping her hands together. "Your mom's awesome! Now all we must do is find the perfect dress. Cinderella's got to look her best, right?" I groaned. "I still can't believe I'm doing this." Miranda shrugged, unfazed. "Ethan, come on! It's going to be epic! You'll have the coolest costume, and besides, you'll get a ton of candy out of it. What's not to love?" I sighed, leaning back in my chair. "You really think this is going to work?" She nodded emphatically. "Absolutely! No one will see it coming! And if anyone tries to give you a hard time, I'll be right there in my own princess dress to back you up." I smirked at the image of the two of us, her as Sleeping Beauty, me as Cinderella, standing together at the Halloween party. It was definitely going to turn heads, that was for sure. But still, there was a part of me that wondered if this would end up being a huge mistake. The rest of the day passed in a blur, and before I knew it, I was walking home, the crisp autumn air tugging at my jacket. I kicked at a pile of leaves on the sidewalk, trying to sort out my feelings about the whole situation. Sure, it could be fun, and maybe I'd even win the costume contest. But what if people laughed? What if it turned into one of those embarrassing stories people remembered forever? When I got home, my mom was waiting for me in the living room. "So good news?" Mom said happily. "I talked it over with Miranda's mother and we decided to go shopping for your two's costumes together tonight." I stared at my mom, my stomach doing a somersault. Shopping for costumes tonight? This was all starting to feel real, too real. The idea of dressing up as Cinderella had been one thing, but actually picking out the dress and putting it on? That was a whole other level. Tonight?" I asked, trying to sound casual, though I could feel my heart racing. Mom nodded, clearly excited. "Yes! I thought it would be fun to make an evening of it. We can grab dinner afterward. Plus, Miranda's mom knows some great places to look for costumes." I couldn't say no. Not with my mom so enthusiastic, and especially not with Miranda's mom involved now. It felt like I was officially committed. Still, my nerves were buzzing. "Yeah, okay. Sounds fun," I said, attempting a smile. Mom beamed, and for a moment, I felt a little more relaxed. Maybe this wouldn't be so bad. After all, Miranda would be there, too, and she was always great at making awkward situations less awkward. Besides, it was just one night, right? An hour later, there was a knock at the front door. When I opened it, Miranda stood in the doorway, dressed in a purple lace dress with white tights. Her brown hair was styled in soft curls, giving her a girly look, even though I knew her as the ultimate tomboy. "Surprise," she said, her voice laced with embarrassment. "My mom's making me wear this to the shop." I was taken aback by her appearance, but the irony was too much, I couldn't help but laugh. "You look... wow," I said, searching for the right words. She shot me a playful glare. "Don't even start," she groaned. "This thing itches like crazy. My mom's only making me wear it because I convinced you to wear a dress. But hey, if I'm suffering, so are you." I smiled, feeling a little more at ease knowing she was in this with me. We both knew this was going to be one of those moments we'd look back on and laugh about, hopefully. "Ready for shopping?" Miranda's mom called from the car, waving at us. I gave my mom a look, and she grinned back at me, her excitement palpable. "Come on, Cinderella, let's find you a dress," my mom said, grabbing her purse. As we drove to the costume shop, I could feel my nerves bubbling up again. Miranda's mom was chattering excitedly about different costumes, making suggestions for colors and fabrics, while my mom was totally on board. They seemed more excited than we were. The store was packed with Halloween shoppers, aisles filled with everything from superhero costumes to witches' hats. The store had a large Halloween central banner hanging over the entrance, and as soon as we walked in, I was hit with a sensory overload, rows of spooky decorations, flashing lights, and the smell of cheap plastic costumes. The walls were lined with shelves stuffed full of everything from superhero masks to witch hats and skeleton gloves. But we weren't here for that. No, our task was much more glittery. Miranda and I exchanged a look as we stepped inside, knowing that our mission was a little different from most of the other kids our age who were browsing the pirate, zombie, and monster sections. "Alright," Miranda's mom said, clapping her hands together. "Let's find you both the perfect princess dresses." We wandered through the racks of costumes, and I couldn't believe how many options there were for Disney princesses. Pink, blue, purple, sparkles, lace, it was like stepping into a different world. Miranda found her dress first, Sleeping Beauty, complete with a tiara and everything. She held it up with a mock curtsy. "I am Princess Miranda, ruler of nowhere, because this whole thing is still weird," she said with a grin. I laughed, but then my mom handed me something that made me freeze, a full-on Cinderella gown. It was pale blue, with layers of tulle and sparkly accents, complete with a sash and puffed sleeves. "Try it on, Ethan," my mom said, clearly enjoying herself. "It's not Halloween until you've gone all out." I reluctantly grabbed the dress and headed to the fitting room. Miranda headed into the dressing room next to mine with hers. Stepping into the fitting room, I stared at the pale blue dress hanging limply in my hands. My heart pounded as I fingered the delicate fabric, feeling its softness and wondering how I'd gotten myself into this. Cinderella! Really, Ethan? I shook my head, trying to push down the nerves bubbling up in my chest. Glancing at the cracked door, I made sure no one could see me. With a deep breath, I pulled the dress over my head. The material felt weird against my skin, light, soft, completely different from anything I'd worn before. As I adjusted the puffed sleeves on my shoulders, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. And there I was, standing in a full-blown Cinderella gown. The skirt puffed out around my legs, shimmering in the light like something out of a fairy tale. I blinked, staring at myself, half expecting to laugh out loud at how absurd I looked. But, the longer I stood there, the more I realized it wasn't as ridiculous as I thought it would be. In fact, it was kind of cool? I smoothed the front of the dress awkwardly, feeling a bit self-conscious but also intrigued. The gown actually fit better than I'd imagined. The light fabric flowed in a way that made me feel, dare I even think it, a little impressive. There was something about seeing myself like this, something about pulling it off that felt oddly empowering. Still, the anxiety was there, a knot in my stomach that tightened with every second. What if people laugh? I could already imagine the jokes, the teasing. I wasn't the type of guy who liked attention, and this was going to attract a lot of attention. But then I remembered Miranda's words, "No one's going to make fun of you, not when you pull it off like a pro." I glanced down at the dress, then adjusted the tiara on my head for the full effect. When I looked back in the mirror, I didn't see a boy making a fool of himself anymore. I saw a guy who was about to blow everyone's expectations out of the water. The idea of walking into that Halloween party like this, surprising everyone, catching them off guard, was suddenly kind of exciting. I twirled once, watching the skirt flare out around me. To my surprise, a smile crept onto my face. Maybe this isn't so bad. Maybe this is actually kind of awesome? A knock on the door interrupted my thoughts. "How's it going in there, Cinderella?" Miranda's voice came through, muffled but teasing. I could hear her giggling from the fitting room next door. Just give me a second." I called back, my voice cracking slightly. I took one last look at myself in the mirror. This is it. I'm actually doing this. When I stepped out of the fitting room, I braced myself. My mom and Miranda's mom both gasped, their eyes lighting up with delight. Miranda, in her own pink Sleeping Beauty dress, stared at me for a second, her eyes wide. I expected her to crack a joke, to make fun of how ridiculous I looked. But instead, she just grinned. "Whoa," she said, circling me like I was some rare artifact. "Ethan, you actually look kind of amazing." I felt my face heat up. Yeah, well, don't get used to it. But deep down, something shifted. There was this weird sense of pride bubbling up. I couldn't believe it, but I was feeling good about this. I was about to rock Cinderella like no one had ever rocked it before. Halloween was going to be unforgettable, and for the first time since this whole crazy plan started, I was ready for whatever came next. Chapter 4, The Final Touches. The next stop on our mission was for girls my age. Mom explained that I needed to get tights, dress shoes and other items. I was glad I wasn't wearing the Cinderella dress anymore, but I still felt self-conscious about being in a girly store as a boy. Even Miranda looked unsure, and she is an actual girl. "So do you like wearing dresses?" I asked her secretly. "No," she said. Miranda crossed her arms and glanced around the store, her face scrunching up in frustration. "No, not at all. I hate wearing dresses," she said firmly, her voice low enough so her mom wouldn't hear. I raised an eyebrow, surprised. "But you seem pretty okay with it," like you've done this before." Miranda rolled her eyes and tugged at the pink ruffles on her dress. "I guess it seems that way, but I'm really not. I hate the way dresses make me feel all trapped. They're scratchy, too fancy, and just not me. It's like I can't move properly, you know? Plus, people expect you to act a certain way when you wear one." I nodded, trying to imagine what she meant. "So why are you going along with all this? You could have just said no to your brother's bed." She sighed, her voice softening. "I guess it's not that simple. I hate losing bets, and besides, sometimes it's just easier to go with the flow instead of fighting everything. I figured if I had to do this, I'd at least try to make it fun. And if I can get you to wear a princess dress too," she added with a grin, "at least we're both in this ridiculousness together." I chuckled, feeling a bit of relief. "Yeah, it's definitely easier knowing you're stuck in this with me." Miranda smiled, but then her expression grew serious. "But for real, I just don't like being told how I should look or act. Dresses feel like they're part of that, like you're supposed to be delicate and proper, and that's just not me. I'm not some dainty princess. I'd rather be climbing trees or playing sports, you know?" I nodded, understanding a bit more now. Miranda was the bravest person I knew, always charging into situations without hesitation, never caring what people thought. But it made sense that wearing a dress, something so far from who she really was, would feel uncomfortable for her. "Well, hey," I said, nudging her with my elbow, "at least we'll rock the costume contest together. I'm sure neither of us is going to look like the typical princess." Miranda grinned, her confidence returning. "Yeah, we're going to own it." As we moved through the store, I thought about what she had said. It wasn't just about wearing a dress, it was about challenging people's expectations. Maybe, in a weird way, this whole thing was more than just Halloween. Maybe it was about showing that we didn't have to fit into the roles people expected of us. Mom led us to the tights, and she picked out a pair of white tights. I looked at Miranda's legs. She was currently wearing tights, her legs were covered in the white material, and I wondered how they would feel to wear them. "It's going to be cold Halloween night," Mom explained. "These will keep your legs warm." I stared at the tights in my mom's hand, my mind buzzing with the absurdity of this whole situation. Tights! I was really about to wear tights! The more I thought about it, though, the less it felt like a joke and more like part of the plan. The whole costume thing was ridiculous, sure, but if I was going to go through with this, I might as well commit. Miranda shot me a sympathetic look, clearly reading my expression. "Don't worry," she said under her breath. "It's weird at first, but you get used to them. Besides, you're already going full Cinderella, you can't back out now." I sighed, nodding. "Yeah, I guess." The cashier rang up the tights along with the silver flats my mom had picked out. I could see Miranda giving the flats a skeptical glance, but she didn't say anything. She knew I was already feeling awkward enough about the whole thing. As we left the store, the reality started sinking in. Halloween was just around the corner, and in a matter of days, I'd be showing up to school dressed as a princess. My stomach churned with a mix of nerves and excitement. Would people laugh? Would they think I was crazy? Or maybe, just maybe, this would be the legendary Halloween Miranda had promised. That night, as I lay in bed, I kept replaying the whole thing in my mind. The dress, the tights, the shoes. It was all happening so fast. But strangely enough, the thought of walking into the party dressed as Cinderella wasn't as terrifying as it had been at first. In fact, the more I thought about it, the more I realized how different this Halloween was going to be. I wasn't just going as some generic pirate. I was doing something bold, something no one would expect. And in a way, that made it all the more exciting. Chapter 5: The Day Before Halloween. Chapter 5: The Day Before Halloween. The day before Halloween crept up on me like a stealthy ghost, and the mix of excitement and nerves that had been brewing inside me was now at an all-time high. School was a blur, lessons flew by as I daydreamed about tomorrow. I wondered how I'd feel stepping into the school gym dressed as Cinderella, with everyone's eyes on me. Some part of me was still worried, but there was also a strange sense of anticipation bubbling beneath the surface. At lunch, Miranda plopped down beside me with her usual flair. She was talking a mile a minute about final touches for her costume, how her mom had found the perfect accessories, including a sparkling necklace and gloves to match. I nodded along, distracted. "So, you ready for tomorrow?" she asked, raising an eyebrow as she took a bite of her sandwich. "I guess," I said, shifting uncomfortably in my seat. "It's just... I don't know what people are going to say. What if it's a disaster?" Miranda gave me a look like I was missing the obvious. "Ethan, trust me. It's not going to be a disaster. People are going to flip out, in a good way. Besides, even if someone does say something dumb, we'll just own it. We're going to look awesome." "Yeah, I guess," I muttered, but her confidence was rubbing off on me a little. Miranda had a way of making things feel like they were going to work out, no matter how crazy the situation seemed. By the time the final bell rang, I was jittery with nerves. Miranda and I parted ways, and I walked home, thinking about the last-minute details. Mom had already promised to help me practice walking in the shoes I picked out, flat and silver, but still completely different from anything I had worn before. And then there were the tights. My mom was right, it was going to be cold, so they were necessary, but it was hard to imagine myself walking around in them without feeling awkward. That night, after dinner, my mom came into my room holding the Cinderella dress, carefully pressed and hanging on a padded hanger. "Big day tomorrow," she said with a smile. "How are you feeling?" "Nervous," I admitted, staring at the shimmering blue fabric. "What if people laugh?" My mom sat down on the edge of my bed, her smile softening. "Ethan, people might laugh, because sometimes people don't know how to react when they see something different. But that's not a bad thing. Sometimes, when you do something unexpected, it can make others think. And if you're confident about it, they'll respect you for it." I nodded, absorbing her words. "You don't have to be perfect, sweetheart," she added. "Just be yourself, and remember that you're doing this for fun, and maybe a little for the candy." She winked at me, and I couldn't help but smile. We spent the next hour going over the final touches. Mom showed me how to put on the tights without ripping them, something I hadn't even considered, and how to adjust the dress so it didn't feel too tight around my shoulders. I practiced walking in the silver flats, which felt weird but manageable. After a few laps around the living room, I was starting to get the hang of it. Before I went to bed, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror, holding the dress in front of me. Tomorrow, I'd be stepping into a whole new role, one that would definitely surprise everyone. But there was a thrill to it now. I was ready. As I lay in bed that night, staring up at the ceiling, I couldn't stop thinking about what Miranda had said. This wasn't just about wearing a princess dress, it was about doing something bold, something no one expected. Maybe it would work out better than I thought. Maybe tomorrow, I'd make Halloween history. Chapter 6 Halloween. The next morning, I woke up to a cool breeze rattling the windows and the faint sound of wind whipping through the trees outside. It was early, but I could already sense the anticipation in the air. The day had arrived. Halloween! After a quiet breakfast, where even the clinking of my spoon against the bowl seemed louder in the hushed house, I went to my room. There, hanging on the back of my closet door, was the Cinderella dress. The pale blue fabric shimmered faintly in the soft morning light, almost as if it held some kind of magic within it. My heart thudded in my chest as I carefully pulled out the white tights and flats from my drawer, laying them out on the bed. The excitement had kept me up late the night before, and now that it was time to get ready, a mix of nerves and thrill flooded through me. I slid into the tights, their snug fit clinging to my legs, and slipped my feet into the delicate flats, feeling oddly regal. But the real transformation didn't happen until I lifted the dress from the hanger. I could feel the weight of the moment as I slowly slipped it over my head, the smooth fabric cascading down and swishing around my legs. For a second, I stood perfectly still, feeling the material settle around me like it was made just for this moment. When I finally dared to look in the mirror, it hit me all over again. I was really doing this. I was really about to step into school as Cinderella. A knock on my door made me turn, and my mom entered, her eyes immediately lighting up when she saw me. "Oh, honey, she whispered, walking over with her hands full of final touches, adjusting the sleeves, smoothing out the skirt. Then, with a little smile, she pulled out the tiara. It wasn't anything fancy, just a small silver crown with little gems, but to me, it was the final piece. She gently placed it on my head, and in that moment, the weight of everything, the day, the costume, the nerves, all pressed down on me. She then took me to my desk where she shook up a bottle of light blue fingernail polish and carefully painted my nails on by one. "Perfect," she said, stepping back and admiring her handiwork. "You look amazing!" Her eyes were warm and proud, but I still wasn't sure. Part of me felt excited, like I could take on the world. The other part felt like my stomach was doing somersaults. "Thanks, Mom," I muttered, trying not to fidget with the tiara that now sat slightly off-center on my head. I straightened it, staring at myself in the mirror one last time, hoping it would give me some extra confidence. But still, there was no turning back now. We stood there for a moment in silence, quiet before the storm, and then she gave me one last encouraging smile before I grabbed my bag and headed out the door. Outside, the wind picked up, blowing against my face as I began my walk to school. The leaves crunched underfoot, the cool air biting at my exposed skin, and I pulled my cardigan tighter around me. My heart pounded in my chest with every step I took, the dress fluttering in the breeze. Each footfall felt like a countdown. Today was the day! I was about to walk into school dressed as Cinderella. I could already imagine the way everyone's eyes would follow me as I walked through the hallway, but I had no idea what they were going to say, or how I would feel when it all happened. With every step closer to the school, my thoughts raced. Would they laugh? Would they stare? Would anyone else even bother with costumes today? I shook the thoughts away, breathing deeply as I rounded the corner and saw the school building looming ahead. My fingers played with the hem of my dress, and I held my head a little higher, forcing a smile. Whatever happened next, I was ready. Chapter 7, School. As I approached the school gates, I could already hear the buzz of excited voices, the sound of kids rushing into the building, their footsteps echoing off the pavement. My heart thudded in time with my footsteps as I adjusted my grip on the straps of my backpack. The air was crisp, swirling with the scent of fallen leaves and that electric energy that only seemed to exist on Halloween morning. Today wasn't just another school day, and I wasn't just Ethan, I was Cinderella. The thought both thrilled and terrified me. I had thought about backing out more than once, but there was something about the idea of it, of doing something totally unexpected, that felt too important to ignore. Miranda had convinced me that this was more than just a costume, it was a statement. I took a deep breath as I stepped through the front doors and braced myself for what was to come. The hallway stretched out before me, buzzing with activity as students in all sorts of costumes rushed to their lockers or chatted with friends. Superheroes, witches, zombies, everyone was wearing something. But none of their costumes were like mine. I took a deep breath, trying to walk as naturally as I could in the pale blue dress and flats, but each step felt like a spotlight was shining down on me. I could feel eyes darting in my direction, and soon enough, the whispers started to ripple through the crowd like the flutter of leaves in the wind. "Ethan? Is that? Whoa, no way! Is that Cinderella?" My throat tightened, but I kept my head high, reminding myself that this was exactly what I had signed up for. This was the moment Miranda had been talking about, the one where I would be the center of attention, whether I wanted to be or not. There was no turning back now. As I made my way down the hall, I caught sight of some of my classmates dressed in the usual Halloween fare: vampires, superheroes, a couple of witches, some clowns, but every now and then, someone would stop and stare at me, eyes wide, clearly taken aback. I couldn't tell if they were impressed, amused, or just plain confused. Some of them laughed, but others just looked shocked, like they couldn't believe what they were seeing. And then, through the sea of costumes and noise, I spotted Miranda. She stood by her locker, transformed into Sleeping Beauty in all her radiant splendor, pink gown, matching gloves, and her hair cascading in loose curls that must have taken her ages to perfect this morning. Miranda never had the patience for hair, but today she clearly made an exception. When her eyes landed on me, her whole face lit up like the 4th of July. There he is!" she called out, practically bouncing toward me in her puffy, glittering dress. Cinderella in the flesh! She gave a dramatic spin, her pink skirt flaring out like a cloud of cotton candy. "Ethan, you look amazing!" I couldn't help but laugh at her excitement, the tension in my shoulders easing just a little. "Thanks," I said, the relief washing over me. "And you look seriously regal," I added, giving her a once-over. It was strange seeing her like this, so different from the rough and tumble Miranda I knew. She wasn't her usual tomboy self, the one who always seemed to carry an air of tough authority. No, tonight she was someone else entirely, elegant, graceful, even beautiful. It was as if the dress had unlocked a side of her I'd never seen before, softening the edges of the girl I thought I knew. Miranda grinned and gave me a playful punch on the arm. "I told you, this is going to be epic! You're totally pulling this off!" As we stood there talking, a group of kids walked by, clearly noticing us in our princess gear. One of them, a tall guy from our grade named Tyler, smirked as he passed. "Wow, Ethan," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Didn't expect to see you in a dress. What, did you lose a bet or something?" My heart stuttered, and for a moment, I wasn't sure what to say. But before I could even open my mouth, Miranda stepped forward, her eyes blazing. "Nah, Tyler," she said, her voice strong and confident. "Ethan didn't lose a bet. He just has more guts than anyone else around here to try something different. What's your costume, by the way? Oh, wait, you're not wearing one. Guess it takes real guts to stand out, huh?" Tyler blinked, clearly not expecting that kind of response. The kids around him chuckled awkwardly before they all shuffled away. I shot Miranda a grateful look, and she winked. "Don't let those guys get to you," she said, looping her arm through mine as we started walking down the hall together. "You're rocking it!" As we entered our classroom, the energy in the room was palpable. Ms. Parker, our teacher, had decked out the room with cobwebs, paper bats, and pumpkins. The orange and black streamers hanging from the ceiling added to the festive, slightly spooky vibe. Students were chatting excitedly as they took their seats, some still showing off their costumes. Superheroes flexed their muscles, witches cackled playfully, and a couple of kids dressed as ghosts floated around dramatically. But amidst all of that, I was still the only one in a full-on princess gown. I could feel the stares as I slid into my seat, my cheeks warming under the weight of all the attention. Miranda, sitting beside me, nudged me gently. "Look at them," she whispered with a mischievous grin. "They're still in shock." I glanced around and, sure enough, people were still sneaking glances at me, their whispers filling the room like background noise. But it didn't feel as harsh as I thought it would. In fact, there was something else there, something I hadn't expected. Admiration. Respect, even. It wasn't just that they were looking at me because I stood out, it was because I had dared to do it. I had dared to be different. For the first time that morning, I smiled. Miranda was right. This was exactly what she had been talking about. I was the star of the show, but not in the way I had feared. And somehow, that made it all worth it. After a few hours we went to lunch. As we headed to the cafeteria for lunch, the usual noise and chaos seemed amplified by the Halloween spirit. The hallways were alive with laughter and chatter, kids in all kinds of costumes huddling together in excitement. I could feel eyes on me as I walked in, the pale blue dress swishing around my legs and the tiara catching the light. But instead of feeling embarrassed, I felt a strange kind of pride. I had made it through the morning without any major disasters, and people were talking about me, not in a bad way, but with a kind of awe that I hadn't expected. Miranda, in her pink Sleeping Beauty dress, strutted beside me like we were royalty walking into a grand ball. She shot me with a playful grin. "Ready to sit on your throne, Cinderella?" she teased. I rolled my eyes but couldn't help laughing. As long as there's pizza in this royal banquet, I'm good. We grabbed our trays and found a spot in the middle of the cafeteria, where the energy was high. As we sat down, a few of our classmates drifted over, clearly curious. Some were grinning, others looking a bit shy, but no one was openly laughing at me. "Whoa, Ethan, your costume is awesome! a girl named Zoe said as she slid into a seat across from us, her eyes wide with admiration. She was dressed as a witch, complete with a pointy hat and green face paint. I didn't think anyone would go for something like that, but you totally pulled it off. Thanks, I replied, trying to play it cool, but inside, the relief was washing over me. It was one thing to go through with the plan, but getting positive reactions made the whole thing way easier. Seriously, I wish I had thought of something that cool, Zoe continued, nudging her friend Sarah, who nodded in agreement. I mean, everyone's doing superheroes and monsters, but you, a boy going as Cinderella? It's genius! Miranda beamed beside me, clearly enjoying the attention too. I told you, she said, her voice full of pride, we're rewriting the rules this Halloween. Just then, the doors to the cafeteria burst open, and a kid dressed as a werewolf howled loudly, trying to make an entrance. A ripple of laughter passed through the room, and for a moment, I was glad that the focus shifted away from me. Lunch passed in a blur of chatter and laughter, and with each passing moment, I started to feel more comfortable in the dress. The initial awkwardness of the morning had faded, and now it felt like I was just part of the fun. Sure, people stared, but they weren't mocking me. If anything, they seemed impressed that I had the guts to go all out for Halloween. As the afternoon wore on, I found myself looking forward to the big event, the costume contest. Every year, the entire school gathered in the gym for it, and this year, I knew that Miranda and I were going to steal the show. Chapter 8: The Halloween Parade. The Halloween Parade was one of the biggest events of the year at our school, and I could feel the excitement buzzing through the hallways as the time approached. Every year, the entire school gathered in the gym, and each grade paraded their costumes in front of teachers and judges. The top costumes in each category, funniest, scariest, most creative, would be called up at the end to win prizes. This year, I had more than just a chance to win. I had a shot to make history. After lunch, the teachers started gathering students in the hallways, guiding everyone toward the gym. The noise level climbed as we walked, the chatter and laughter echoing off the walls. Miranda and I walked side by side, and for once, I didn't feel self-conscious about the dress swishing around my legs or the tiara on my head. We were a royal duo, and we were owning it. Miranda glanced over at me, grinning, feeling like a real princess yet? Maybe a little, I admitted, adjusting the skirt. But you know, I think I'm pulling it off. You're doing more than that, she said confidently. We're going to crush this parade. The gym was decked out in full Halloween style, giant paper ghosts hung from the ceiling, orange and black streamers crisscrossed the walls, and plastic pumpkins lined the stage where the judges sat. Students filled the bleachers, chattering excitedly, waiting for the parade to start. We lined up by grade, and as we stood there waiting, I could see kids looking over at us, some whispering to their friends, others pointing and smiling. But unlike this morning, it didn't make me feel nervous. In fact, it kind of felt awesome. The lights dimmed slightly as Miss Parker, our teacher, stepped onto the stage with a microphone in hand. She was dressed as a witch, complete with a tall black hat and green face paint. She raised her hand for silence, and the gym quieted down. "Alright, everyone!" she called out, her voice echoing through the gym. "Welcome to the annual Halloween parade! I hope you all had a fantastic morning showing off your costumes, but now it's time for real fun! Each grade will walk through the gym, and our judges will be looking for the funniest, scariest, and most creative costumes. So, let's see what you've got!" The gym erupted in cheers, and the parade began. One by one, students from the younger grades walked across the gym floor, showing off their costumes. There were witches and wizards, superheroes, zombies, and a few inflatable dinosaurs that got huge laughs from the crowd. I could feel my heart racing as our turn got closer. Miranda and I were near the back of the line, and the anticipation was building. Finally, it was our grade's turn. Miranda nudged me as the line started moving. "Showtime, Cinderella!" I took a deep breath, feeling the adrenaline surge through me. We walked into the gym, and as soon as we stepped out onto the floor, I could feel the shift in the room. Eyes were on us, and I knew we were stealing the spotlight. Miranda, in her glittering pink Sleeping Beauty gown, waved to the crowd with a royal flourish, while I kept my head high, channeling all the confidence I could muster. The crowd murmured with surprise, and I could hear a few gasps and whispers. "Is that Ethan? No way! That's so cool!" We made our way across the gym, and by the time we reached the judges, I could see smiles on their faces. Ms. Parker raised an eyebrow at us, clearly impressed. "Well, she said into the microphone, I think we have a couple of princesses here who weren't afraid to go all out this Halloween. Let's hear it for Sleeping Beauty and Cinderella." The crowd cheered, and I could feel my face flush with a mix of embarrassment and pride. Miranda gave me a quick wink as we continued walking. As we exited the gym floor, we joined the other students, waiting for the rest of the grades to finish their parades. I couldn't help but feel like we'd nailed it. We had taken the risk, and it had paid off. When the parade ended, the judges huddled together, whispering and pointing at various costumes. The whole gym was buzzing with anticipation. Finally, Ms. Parker stepped up to the microphone again. "Alright, everyone! The judges have made their decisions, and it's time to announce the winners of this year's Halloween costume contest." She paused dramatically as the crowd quieted down. For the funniest costume, we have Jake as an inflatable dinosaur. The gym erupted in applause as Jake, wobbling in his giant costume, made his way up to the stage, grinning from ear to ear. For the scariest costume, we have Zoe as the Wicked Witch. Zoe, green-faced and cackling, strutted up to the stage, clearly thrilled. And finally, Ms. Parker said, glancing at the judges for confirmation, the winner for most creative costume goes to Ethan for dressing up as Cinderella. The gym fell silent for a split second, as if everyone was processing what they had just heard. Then, the applause started, slow at first, but quickly building into a loud, enthusiastic roar. My heart pounded in my chest as I stood there, frozen in disbelief. Did she just say, "I won?" Miranda elbowed me hard in the ribs, grinning from ear to ear. "Ethan! You did it! Get up there!" I blinked, still trying to process what was happening. The crowd was cheering, kids were clapping, and Ms. Parker was looking at me expectantly. I swallowed hard and forced myself to move. My legs felt like jelly as I walked toward the stage, my dress swishing around me with every step. It was a surreal moment, one I never expected when I had agreed to this crazy plan. As I reached the stage, Ms. Parker smiled and handed me a small trophy shaped like a pumpkin. "Congratulations, Ethan," she said, her voice warm. "You really went all out, and it paid off." I took the trophy, my hands trembling slightly, and glanced out at the crowd. My classmates were still clapping, some even whistling. I spotted a few people who had teased me earlier, now looking genuinely impressed. And then there was Miranda, still in her princess gown, grinning at me with pure joy. I gave a small, awkward wave to the crowd, unsure of what else to do, and then stepped back to join the other winners. As I stood there on the stage, holding the pumpkin trophy, I realized something. I hadn't just dressed up as Cinderella, I had taken a risk, done something totally out of my comfort zone, and it had paid off. And it wasn't just about winning a contest. It was about proving to myself, and to everyone else, that sometimes the craziest ideas are the ones that make you stand out. After the awards were handed out and the applause died down, we were allowed to head back to our classrooms. As Miranda and I walked side by side through the hallways, she nudged me with a grin. "I told you it'd be epic," she said, her eyes twinkling. I couldn't help but laugh. "Yeah, you were right. This Halloween, it's definitely one for the books." We made our way to our lockers, still buzzing from the excitement. The rest of the day felt like a blur of high fives, compliments, and wide-eyed stares. I had gone from feeling nervous and out of place to feeling like a bit of a legend. And by the time the final bell rang and I started my walk home, I knew that this was a Halloween I'd never forget. As I kicked through the fallen leaves on the sidewalk, my trophy tucked under my arm, I smiled to myself. Maybe next year I'd go back to something more traditional, like a pirate or a superhero. But this year, I had gone all out, and I wouldn't have had it any other way. Chapter 9, Trick or Treat. The sun slipped beneath the horizon on Halloween night, casting a warm, golden glow over the neighborhood. Orange and purple lights twinkled from doorways, and jack-o'-lanterns flickered with life on porches. The streets hummed with excitement, children running from house to house, their laughter mingling with the crunch of fallen leaves underfoot. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for, trick-or-treating. I stood in front of the mirror one last time, adjusting the shimmering blue Cinderella dress. My mom had added a soft, matching cape at the last minute to keep me warm, and my silver flats glimmered faintly under the dim light. The tiara rested perfectly on my head. After the morning's nerves and pulling off the unimaginable, winning the costume contest, I felt a confidence I hadn't expected. I was ready for the night ahead. "Are you all set, Cinderella?" Mom asked, adjusting the collar of my cape with a smile. "No last minute change to the pirate costume?" I shook my head, grinning. "Nope. I'm committed now." The doorbell rang, and I knew it was Miranda. When I opened the door, there she stood in her pink Sleeping Beauty gown, a matching cape thrown over her shoulders. She gave me a playful curtsy. "Your royal escort has arrived," she announced with a flourish. I laughed, returning the curtsy with newfound ease. "Shall we?" Together, we stepped into the cool evening air. The sky had deepened to a dusky blue, with stars beginning to sparkle overhead. Groups of children darted between houses, their bags filled with candy treasures. Miranda and I quickly fell into our usual rhythm, chatting and laughing about the day's adventures. "I still can't believe you won," Miranda said, shaking her head in disbelief. "I mean, I knew you could do it, but seeing you up there holding that trophy? Priceless!" I swung my trick-or-treat bag happily. I thought people would make fun of me, but they didn't. They actually thought it was cool. "See?" Miranda nudged me with her elbow. "I told you, taking a risk can totally pay off. Ethan the Cinderella? That's legendary!" We roamed from house to house, and soon our bags began to sag under the weight of candy. Neighbors stopped us to compliment our costumes, and a few even asked for photos. For the first time in ages, I didn't feel awkward or out of place. I felt seen, and I felt proud. At one point, we ran into Liam and some other kids from school. He was dressed as a superhero, a mask perched lopsided on his face. He stopped in front of me, giving a thumbs up. "Dude, you killed it at the contest," he said, grinning. "No one saw that coming, but it was awesome. You totally deserved the win." "Thanks, Liam." A warm feeling spread through me. The win wasn't just about the trophy, it was about having the guts to be different and realizing that people respected me for it. After a few more houses, we found ourselves back at my place. Our bags were bursting with candy, and we plopped down on the porch steps to sift through our loot. As always, Miranda handed over her almond joys, she hated coconut, and I swapped out all my gummy candies, which she loved. "This Halloween is definitely going down in history," Miranda said with a sigh of contentment, leaning back to gaze at the stars. "Yeah," I agreed, unwrapping a Snickers. I never imagined I'd spend Halloween as Cinderella, but I'm really glad I did. When we went inside, Mom greeted us with a warm smile. "Miranda's staying over tonight," she said. Her mom had to work late. Then she pulled out a bag from behind her back, revealing 2 nightgowns, one pink with Sleeping Beauty on the front, the other light blue with Cinderella. Miranda's eyes sparkled with amusement as she gave me a sly look. "Seriously?" she whispered, stifling a laugh. I stared at the gowns, feeling my cheeks flush. After everything that had happened today, this was not what I expected. But Mom handed me the Cinderella nightgown as if it were the most normal thing in the world. "Mom!" I started, but before I could protest, Miranda snatched the pink nightgown and held it up with a mischievous grin. "If we're going full princess, we might as well commit, right?" I groaned, but her enthusiasm was contagious. After all the craziness of the day, what was one more thing? It was just for tonight, and besides, Miranda was right. We were already in too deep to back out now. I grabbed the Cinderella nightgown and made my way to the bathroom to change. As I slipped it on, I couldn't help but chuckle. Here I was, standing in front of the mirror in a Cinderella nightgown, after a day of wearing a dress, winning a costume contest, and trick-or-treating like royalty. It was surreal, but, oddly, it didn't feel as strange as I thought it would. When I returned to the living room, Miranda was sprawled on the couch, flipping through channels in her Sleeping Beauty nightgown. She shot me a playful smirk. "See? We're really living the princess life now!" I rolled my eyes, but a smile tugged at my lips. "Yeah, I guess we are!" The rest of the night was a blur of candy, Halloween specials, and laughter. Mom popped in occasionally to check on us, but mostly, she left us to enjoy the night. We talked about everything, how weirdly awesome the day had been, the unexpected thrill of winning the contest, and how good it felt to just have fun without overthinking. As the night wore on and our energy began to fade, Miranda let out a long yawn, stretching comfortably on the couch. "This has been the best Halloween ever," she murmured. "Thanks for going all out with me, Ethan." I glanced at her, feeling grateful for her wild idea. "Thanks for convincing me," I said softly. "I never would have done this without you." She smiled, and we sat in comfortable silence, the TV glowing softly in the background. Slowly, the exhaustion of the day caught up with us, and we drifted off to sleep, surrounded by candy wrappers and cozy blankets. As I closed my eyes, memories of the day flickered in my mind. Dressing as Cinderella had been an unexpected adventure, but it taught me something important: sometimes, the boldest choices, the ones that scare you the most, can be the most rewarding. This was a Halloween I'd never forget. And next year? Whatever costume I chose, I knew I'd go all in again. Because in the end, it's not just about what you wear, it's about owning it.